Once Mukesh Ambani and I were talking, and he said, "Doc, we must leapfrog to something." So I asked him, "Do you know why the frog leaps?" So he says, "No." I said, "I'll tell you. Frog leaps because he's afraid of the predator and jumps a few feet. Do you want to do that because we are afraid of the competitor, jump a few feet in defense? We should pole vault. The size of the pole is the size of our aspiration." He loved it. President Obama had said, education and innovation are currencies of the future. I added further to it. I said, education in innovation and innovation in education are the currencies of the minds on the margin are not marginal minds.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the KVKurious Podcast. Our guest for today is a highly decorated scientist, Professor Raghunath Anant Mashelkar, who is formerly the Director General of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. He has won all the three Padma Awards, Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan. He is a fellow of the Royal Society. He is on the leading academies of science across the world. He is an inventor with multiple patents. He has won many honorary doctorates, awards, and recognitions to his credibility. Professor Mashelkar is a man of insanely infectious energy, dangerous optimism, and abundant hope. So in this conversation, we zoom into Professor Mashelkar's life, how he's risen from growing up in a small village to steering Mashelkar committees. So of course, we unravel the secrets behind Mashelkar committees, and we learn from Professor Mashelkar. Listen to this highly inspiring, highly engaging, highly optimistic, highly hopeful conversation with Professor Mashelkar, only on the KVKurious Podcast. Hi, Professor Raghunath. Thanks a lot for being on my podcast. Super excited to speak to you and learn about your journey through academia and leading industry at the forefront.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Sir, so you must be one of those people who really stands out in the world of academia, where you have done enough scientific research, but at the same time, you've also participated in industries, being on the boards of multiple leading companies. What has allowed you to play a balanced role in both these worlds?
Yes, I have a basic philosophy that I don't distinguish between science and application of science. They go hand in hand. As a scientist, when you do science, you create new knowledge. But when you convert that knowledge into wealth, it becomes a kind of application of science. Some call it industrial research, some call it applied research, whatever. To me, the terminologies don't matter. There is a creation of knowledge and the use of knowledge in making a difference, whether it is for creating wealth, whether it is for creating social good, it just doesn't matter. So let me take you through the reason why I'm saying that. You know, when I joined National Chemical Laboratory in 1976, India was a poor country. Not like $2,000 GDP per capita. It was almost $100 GDP per capita, maybe. And we didn't have foreign exchange. And I needed an equipment called Weisenberg rheogoniometer for continuing my work on rheology and non-Newton fluid mechanics. And it would take me 2 years because digitally clearance, not manufactured in India certificate, and so on. So I would have done nothing, just waiting for that equipment for 2 years. So I said, what is the equipment God has given me? This one. Okay. My brain, my ability to think. So I actually changed my field and went into mathematical modeling, where the only thing that we require is this. And I can tell you, within 5 years, 77, I started the work. 82, I got Bhatnagar Prize, which is our highest science prize for scientists under 45. Now, the interesting thing about that work was the following. I became a consultant for a company called Indian Organic Chemicals, and they used to have a plant in Manali near Chennai. and they made me a consultant. When I went there, I found that they had licensed technology, okay, from Germany. And therefore, they just did not know what was happening inside the reactors. What they were producing polyester, by the way. Polyester is polyethylene terephthalate, from which you make the fiber, okay, and you wear your shirts or whatever. So I looked at the entire process from end to end. And I said, you're completely dark about what's happening inside. It's a black box for you. I will throw the laser of light in terms of knowledge on what's happening. And then I had a PhD student, K. Ravindranath, to do that modeling and simulation. So we went through the entire chain, transistorification, E-state to change, solid state polycondensation, mid state poly, the whole range, actually, and we published it. Ravindranath, based on the publication that he had, got PhD. But because we did mathematical modeling and simulation, they understood what was happening. And then they could make process changes by which the productivity will improve without any substantial financial input or capital equipment input or operating cost input, none of that. So they could raise the productivity, product quality, create a better fiber, faster, better, cheaper, and so on and so forth. Now, here is a question. If it is industrial research, how come Ravindranath got his PhD and I got my award for science? If it is scientific research, how come industry benefited from that? You can see these are two sides of the same coin, creation of knowledge and its use. So that is my fundamental philosophy. A lot of my research, by the way, has been driven by what I saw in industry. For example, when I was in England, I went to a Unilever factory and I saw some peculiar sort of bend through which their slurry passed before they actually created these by spraying the detergent. And based on that curve, the pressure drop, they could figure out whether the consistency was right. Now, that is an observation. But then I did deep research as to what happens in a bend, like there is a centrifugal force and how it does the damping of elasticity, and classical papers were produced on that. So linking what happens in industry and generating problems sort of out of that and bringing that knowledge back once again for improvement, I think is something that I have always lived with.
Very interesting. But why do you think most others are not able to do this particular thing of trying to understand pertinent problems in the world of industries, try to break them down into the simplest of scientific problems and tackle each of them through a scientific approach and translate the application back into the industry?
Yes, I would say you're talking about Indian industry.
Okay.
US industry does not do that. US industry have powerful research and development sort of wings who actually generate new technologies for them, in-house R&D. Mm-hmm. It is in India that the investment in industrial R&D has been very small. Let me give you some statistics so that you will understand.
Yeah.
If you look at India's investment in research and development, they have stayed stagnant at 0.7% of GDP for the last 30 years. Can you believe it? Mm-hmm. 0.7% of GDP. Of course, our GDP has gone up. That's no denying that. Now, how does it compare with, let's say, China? China is 2.3%. How does it compare with Korea? Korea is 4%. How does it compare with other Europe and US, whether it is United States or European countries? It is around 3 to 4%. Okay, so ours is 0.7%. That's the first difference. But the major difference is, in our case, 70% of that investment comes from the government.
Okay.
From the government. In their case, including China, Korea, US, Europe, 70% of them comes from industry. You understand the difference?
Yes.
Means the industry, the input from industry in terms of R&D has remained low. That is the problem. Now, what are the reasons? That's what you're asking me.
Correct.
Now, there are sectors where the investments are much higher, like, for example, drugs and pharmaceuticals. Okay. You will find they are the highest in terms of India. And that is why you will find that India has become, let's say, the pharmacy of the world. We produce the highest quality, cheapest generic drugs. But that is done by what is called as innovating in process chemistry. We don't create new molecules. We don't discover new drugs because that's a very expensive process. It costs $1 billion, $1.5 billion, basically. And we did not have that particular strength. And even when there were efforts by like Dr. Anji Reddy, who created sort of a new discovery laboratory, or Pyramids, for example, they created one. They had to actually lower down that activity for a simple reason that when you create new molecule, there are failures. And you have to then write it off. For every 100 molecules, one succeeds. So that capacity is not there. But those molecules which are off patent, doing innovative chemistry and supplying, creating generic drugs and supplying, that also requires research. All right. But it's the process chemistry research. It is not product research. That we have done. So I think coming back to your questions, why don't we do that? There are several reasons. I think first is, I always say, India had three freedoms. The first freedom was political freedom, 1947. Second was the economic freedom, 1991, when India liberalized, opened up, and threw it to the competition, basically. All right. And third one is actually 2008, when we signed the nuclear deal and then getting access to technologies which were denied to us, so as to say, strategically. As you know, we had a denial-driven innovation sort of era where we'll ask for supercomputer, they will not give it, then we'll say, thank you very much, we'll do it ourselves. We'll ask for a cryogenic engine, they will not give it, we'll say, thank you very much, we'll do it. All right? That was the kind of region we had. And from that, we got sort of free. Now, if you look at until 1991, all that we're doing, we're copying, reverse engineering, because we're allowed to do that. For example, we had process patents, but not product patents. All right. That means actually any new molecule that was discovered, let us say abroad, within 18 months, we could copy it. And legitimately, by law, it was allowed. Okay. Therefore, we did not focus on creating new molecules. We just focused on taking that molecule and doing clever chemistry. For example, if it was a 12-step process, can we do it in 7-step? Can we do it at lower temperature? Can we do it at lower pressure? Can we do it with generation of less effluent? And so on. These were the kind of improvement kind of innovation that we always sort of did until 1991. So therefore, India really opened up after it became liberalized, and then innovation always thrives when there is a competition, all right? Like the chairman of Sony had said, that if I don't displace my product myself, my competitors will do it for me. That threat was not there for Indian industry. So I think there is a late waking up, if I may say, as far as Indian industry is concerned. There are exceptions now that are coming up. There is no doubt about that. But I would say that is the sort of basic challenge that we have had.
So does this largely boil down to what the objective of the industries is and how it is transforming? That early on, the objective of the industry was to come up with processes that could produce these products with much lesser costs and much lesser effort. And maybe now we are transitioning our efforts into coming up with newer products ourselves.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we have to realize, very frankly, is the very definition of innovation. Technology innovation is just one innovation, all right? But there are other parts of innovation, like business model innovation, system delivery innovation, workflow innovation. All right. And India is master in those other innovations, and they make a big difference. I mean, you look at, for example, Arvind Eye Care. Okay. A cataract surgery costs $3,000 abroad. They do it in $30.
Mm.
Then you would say, oh my God, it is 100 times cheaper. That means it must be 100 times worse in terms of quality. No. If you go to a table where they show Royal College of Ophthalmic Surgeons versus Arvind Eye Care, what do you find? Arvind Eye Care beats them in 7 out of 7 parameters post-surgery, after a cataract surgery is done. All right. That means what we are doing is delivering very high quality at very low cost by doing an innovation. Now, this is not a technological innovation. This is what is called as a workflow innovation. All right. And they picked up the idea from McDonald's, because this is kind of an assembly line approach that they have. Different people doing different things. Like in cataract surgery, the highest expenses are with the actual surgeon who does the delicate last part. But before that, there are several work issues which need to be solved. Why should that expensive surgeon do everything? So what they do is that they divide that work, and then each one actually is trained. He could be sort of a semi-skilled worker, but once he's told to do something 1,000 times, he becomes skilled in that. Okay, so that workflow distributions give them the advantage today, and it is an incredible example. It is same thing with Narayan Rudalaya, for example, Dr. Devi Sethi. His heart surgeries, if you look at their quality, they are better than the New York surgeons, basically. But they are done at what cost? Absolutely nothing, so as to say. So I think when you look at Indian research and innovation, you have to use a different lens, consider all the parts. And it is actually the combination of all these that actually work. I have written this book. This is called Leapfrogging to Pole Vaulting. Okay. But the subtitle is more important: Creating Radical Yet Sustainable Transformation. So let me take you through this. I have been chairman of Reliance Innovation Council, okay, for several years now. And we had a very powerful council with Nobel laureate John Marilyn, Nobel laureate Bob Grubbs, George Whiteside from Harvard, perhaps the greatest genius of our times, yes. And you know, we normally have this challenge of Saraswati versus Lakshmi. And he is the highest cited scientist in the world. That means a great achievements in terms of Saraswati. But the market cap of this company is $30 billion. So Lakshmi, bringing that sort of together. That's what we need to do in our academia, bringing Saraswati and Lakshmi together. So anyway, and if you have seen, Reliance has grown exponentially. They have doubled up almost every 3 years. And their dictum is growth is life. But then they also believe in innovation as a way of life. You put it together, it becomes innovation-led growth. But when you have an exponential growth, you can't have incremental innovation-led exponential growth. You have to have disruptive game-changing exponential growth. So that is what they have achieved. And there is a lot of innovation which does not count in your standard research technology jargon. To give an example, once Mukesh Ambani and I were talking, and he said, Doc, we must leapfrog to something. So I asked him, do you know why the frog leaps? So he says, no. I said, I'll tell you. Frog leaps because he's afraid of the predator and jumps a few feet. Do you want to do that because we are afraid of the competitor, jump a few feet in defense? We should pole vault. The size of the pole is the size of our aspiration. He loved it.
Wow.
And we created a program called Beyonders. That means out of our 3 to 4 lakh employees, we picked up some 25, 30 young people who could think beyond the realms of possibilities. and pole vault, beyonders, going beyond the realms of possibilities, And has Jio done, Reliance done the pole vaulting? Yes. If you look at today, Reliance has almost 450 million customers, let us say, in Jio. Now, if you look at February 2017, India was 156 among 231 nations in mobile data consumption. Within 1 year after Jio came, we jumped not from 156 to 100. We did not leapfrog to 100. We pole vaulted to number 1. And today, we are number 1. Okay. Now, if you deep dive into it, you will find that there is a huge amount of innovation that they have done. Like, for example, onboarding 50 million customers. If you see, right from telephone to mobile to Facebook, for onboarding 50 million customers, the record was Facebook, 2 years. Reliance did it in 83 days. Now, there was a lot of innovation that was involved there, like laying fiber optic line. I'm just giving you an example so that the listeners have an idea about what innovation is constituted of. Innovation is doing things differently to make a difference. Innovation is also seeing things differently to make a difference. For example, when they were laying fiber, what do you do when you lay the fiber optic lines? You dig the road, okay? And they affect traffic, that, and the other, etc. They say, we'll not dig the road. In oil and natural gas industry, there is what is called as horizontal drilling, where you go down, drill, and then go horizontally. All right. They picked up that idea, basically, all right, and did the drilling in the fastest possible time. That was never done before. For that, what you require is picking up an idea from a completely different set of this thing and using it. All right. This brings me to the new book that was launched last week.
Yeah.
Experiment. It is called Exponential Improvement. But the subtitle is Converging Parallels, basically. Converging Parallels is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Because parallel lines never meet. All right. Like oil and natural gas industry has nothing to do with digging the road fiber optic. But they put it together. Like Henry Ford, when he created the first car, it was very, very expensive. Nobody will buy it. Then one day he went to slaughterhouse and saw that the animals were being cut and they were using an assembly line approach for finally meat packaging, right? In a sense, the worker did not come to the part came to the worker. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And we used it and the prices dropped dramatically and it became people's car. Now, what does slaughterhouse have to do with auto manufacturing? Nothing. The book shows how these two can be related. So I think coming back to my basic thesis, I think our idea that research is putting your head down and working in the lab and then creating a product is very limited. We have to understand that major breakthroughs take place. Like, for example, you look at Airbnb. It's a business model innovation. And that has changed the world, basically. Or Ola, and things of that, or Netflix, for example, etc. It is all about different ways of sort of thinking and doing things. And finally, what you require is a combination of
that. I get the entire narrative, but when we speak of businesses like Airbnb, Ola, or one of these platform internet first businesses versus something which is much more operationally intensive, say digging the roads and putting fiber optic cables and taking internet supply to masses. Isn't there a significant difference between these two in terms of just how you have to approach running these businesses? And when it comes to operationally intensive, the amount of course, we can have enough innovations around the business models, but much of these will also require significant breakthroughs in the way science is done for this, right? And maybe that, do you think that that becomes a bottleneck for most people to not achieve exponential growth, because breakthroughs are, improvement in science itself is time consuming?
Oh, yes, of course. The basic issue is that when we see uh, breakthroughs, like, for example, during COVID, mRNA vaccines came up. And normally it takes 10 years from sort of mind to marketplace or concept to actual commercialization, but we did it in 1 year. But don't forget that for that 1 year, the investments in the basic science of mRNA, all right, were done for 30 years. If that platform was not there, it would not have happened. For example, take our own case. Why am I giving all the foreign examples? Let me take our case. You saw that when COVID hit us, we had two vaccines, Covaxin and Covishield. Covishield was made by Serum Institute based on a licensed technology. It was not our own, but they created outstanding world-class manufacturing. On the other hand, Covaxin was done by Bharat Biotech, Krishna Ella, all right, based on his own research, basically. And where was the platform born? That platform was born 25 years ago, because I remember Krishna growing, and while I was in Delhi as Director General of CSIR and Secretary Department of Scientific Industrial Research, I was involved with Technology Development Board of Department of Science and Technology. We all supported him. And that is how he could build that particular platform. So what you say is correct. That was a long, hard work of so many years, which when actually Covaxin came, when the COVID came, Covaxin came to our rescue. Now today, we take ourselves sort of as somebody who has done very well in COVID times, somebody who has got 200 crore jabs, 200 plus crore jabs, and it would not have been possible if this base was tortured. So your point is right. There has to be strong investment in basic science, because the results will not show up immediately. They will show up much later. I've seen that myself. For example, when Bhopal disaster took place, I was very young. I was just 42. And overnight, 2,600 people died, as you know, because of the leak of methyl isocyanate. And I was appointed as a technical assessor for the inquiry commission. And there was no confidence that we could do it. I said, what the hell are we talking about? We can do it. And some of the finest work in terms of that investigation, in terms of the accident, by using deepest of science was done, which is absolutely incredible. Same thing that happened, Maharashtra gas cracker complex, 34 people died by explosion. Again, I was the chairman of the committee that was constituted by Mr. Chandrasekhar was then the Prime Minister. And once again, people said, we'll get consultants from UK because similar accident had taken place there. I said, no, we'll do it here. And it was our National Aerospace Laboratory, National Chemical Laboratory, and laboratories like that, and IITs who came together and did that. So I think that fundamental base, I'm not talking about selling a product. I'm talking about a natural disaster, whether it is COVID or whether it is man-made accident. In all these cases, as a matter of fact. But as I said earlier, it is not just science, it's application, that mindset, to how to apply that science. Otherwise, you Google and you have access to all the knowledge in the world. What do you do with it to create wealth? Isn't it? That's what is important. The timing of the idea matters, like Hotmail. You see the wealth that was created by Suresh, but the point was it was a simple need of the society at that point in time, and he thought of Hotmail. All right, it was not a Nobel Prize like a breakthrough, but it was sort of transformative. So I think that particular mindset in our education is very, very important. As President Obama had said, education and innovation are currencies of the future. I added further to it I said education in innovation and innovation in education are the currencies of the. So what happens? Our students learn by rote. So from learning by rote, we have to move to learning by doing. But doing not as what our teacher said, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Learning by creating. And from there to learning by co-creating. And this has to start from there, as a matter of fact. You can't ask a 21-year-old boy, hey, from tomorrow you will be innovative. It has to come within our sort of culture. That will make a difference, basically, fundamentally.
Interesting. Sir, so at least for the last 3 decades, you yourself have been so in many influential positions, and at the same time have dealt with people like Ambani's, Tata's, and the government, politicians and ministers. What do you think is fundamentally different about the approach that you take, or one of these people that you interact with take, that allows you to be so much more successful and allows you to do so much more with your time that most other people are not able to do?
That's a very interesting question. You're right, actually. I've been involved in large number of different things, actually, diversity of things. There's a point in time when I had, I think I was involved with some 31 committees. Many of them I was chairman of, and so on and so forth. In fact, as you know, Mashelkar, as soon as we utter the word Mashelkar, there are 2-3 things people talk about. The first is the turmeric patent, wound healing properties of turmeric. You know, that patent battle was called Haldi Ghati. That's what people talk about, or Basmati. The second thing they remember is patent curve, because I pushed patents to an extreme, as you know. And third thing they remember are Mashelkar committees. There have been 16 Mashelkar committees. I told you about one, that is Bhopal. In fact, there was a saying that when in difficulty, form a Mashelkar committee. So I have chaired in fact, there was somebody told me that when there was a CNG controversy in Delhi and Supreme Court had come down very hard on the government, there was Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, and Ram Naik was the Petroleum Natural Gas Minister, and there was Secretary whom I knew, and he said when the discussion started on what to do, after a few minutes, Atalji stopped everybody and said, "Aisa kariye, ek Mashelkar committee bana dijiye, sab hal ho jayega. Do one thing, form a Mashelkar committee, everything will be solved." So that was the kind of confidence. So I have held a number of these. Now, the question is, I ran CSIR, which is world's biggest industrial research development organization, 40 labs. I was at the same time president of Indian National Science Academy. And at the same time, I was handling these Mashelkar committees. Like in 2003, there were 2. One was on the national auto fuel policy. Like, we talk about BS4, BS5, BS6. We used to talk about Euro 2, Euro 3, Euro 4 and bring the path. And the other one was drug regulatory system. Now, how did you do it all together? I think there are 3 or 4 points I like to make. I think the very first point is that we underestimate the power of our brain on what it can do. And I don't think we use even 10% of its power. I'll give you an example to illustrate that. For example, I was a member of the governing board of Sri Chitra Tirunal Medical Center in Kerala. And G. Parsarthi was the chairman, the great man, from Jawaharlal Nehru's time to Indira Gandhi's time. He guided our foreign policy and so on. And he had, of course, retired by the time I met him. And he told me about the way Indira Gandhi used to work. I think she was one of the hardest working prime minister, like our current prime minister, Narendra Modi ji. I think he is one of the hardest working person that I have seen in my life. So her style of work, I will tell you. For example, she has to clear a file. So she would be reading it. and somebody else will be reading a file to her. So imagine what is happening. She is reading, and through eyes she is absorbing, it is going to brain. Somebody is reading, so she is hearing, that is going to brain. And the brain is working. And he told me, the fellow who was reading the file would feel, oh my God, she is getting tired. So she will slow down. So she used to say, Are, padhte jao, keep on reading, don't stop. So when I heard that, I said, if she can do it, I can also do it. You understand? Doing two things at the same time. And I developed that ability even earlier. I remember I was in England doing work on what was called as viscoelastic fluids. And I remember while watching BBC, those backsides of those huge computer printout, that you used to get those days. Now you don't get that. Writing some of the breakthrough equations at that time. So I think the main point I want to make is that we underestimate the capacity to do parallel processing and think, and we can do much. That is one. The second point is also the following. How do you create time? By doing, say, for example, I have great demand on me in terms of invitations, convocation addresses, keynote addresses, these, etc., and all sorts of areas. Okay. Now, many of them I'm not an expert in, but people somehow or other have a misunderstanding that I know everything and they trust me and they call me. But then you have to live up to the expectations. So what I do is that in every lecture, at least 1/3 of it is new. At least 1/3 of it. So what happens is then you are forced to read. All right. So in the morning, just like you have sort of your physical exercise, I read basically new things. That's number one. Number two, as I'm falling short of time, I've created innovations. For example, nowadays, you can not only read books, you can hear books. Not only you can read paper, you can hear papers. All right. So supposing I'm giving a lecture on a particular topic, use iPod. And while taking a walk, as a matter of fact, you're taking your 30-40 minute walk, and at the same time, you are listening to 2 lectures. Now, you can just imagine every day, if you're listening to 2 new lectures, how much you will add. Now, you can always take an excuse. Either I can read or I will walk. Or either I can hear or I can walk. No, you can do sort of both. So I think the basic point I'm trying to convey essentially is that your brain's capacity is far more than you can use. And then people like me are forced to, because there is so much of demand, so as to say, from all sections of the society that you have to, and particularly if you continue to be active in research, that actually becomes even more. So that's a simple answer to how do you do so many things more effectively. That's the point you are asking.
Yes. So when you were an undergrad at ICT, did you ever foresee or imagine that someday you are going to be the chancellor there, and then you are going to contribute for decades and be so instrumental in how industrial research happens in the country and much more of policy making?
Oh, not at all. As a matter of fact, very frankly, this is not very widely known. My autobiography has just come. It is titled as Durdamya Ashavadi. That means kind of an eternal optimist, because people call me a dangerous optimist, by the way. And there I've narrated this story, but I don't mind telling you. The fact that I went to ICT and became a chemical engineer is itself an accident. You know, what happened was in Inter-Science, we had SSC, Secondary School Certificate, 11th standard. And then 2 more years, used to do Inter-Science. And in Inter-Science, I had stood second among 12,000 students in Delhi, Mumbai University, and Arun Dravid had stood first. Arun Dravid went to IIT, Bombay. So therefore, in the remaining sort of candidates, I was left as number 1. And I did not like chemistry. because it was all mugging up. I like physics, I like maths. And I decided to become a mechanical engineer. At that time, the topmost institute in the country was VJTI. All right. I took admission there, and the admission results came up, and I was, of course, on the top. Okay. One day, I was standing at a bus stop, and Arun Dravid, my friend, was passing. His father was a ICS officer. They used to live in Kerala. So he stopped the car. He says, what are you going to do? I said, mechanical engineering. I said, what are you going to do? He said, chemical engineering. I said, what? What is chemical engineering? He said, I'll explain to you. And he took me home, as a matter of fact. And then told me chemical engineering is all not chemistry. It is physics, it's mathematics, heat transfer, mass transfer, fluid dynamics, and so on and so forth. Okay. And I say, is that so? That sounds interesting. And practically on the last day, I actually put my, filled the forms, paid the 30 rupees fee or whatever it was, and sort of got. So that was an accident, I must say. But having done that, if you ask me, what would you be in your next life? I'd like to be a chemical engineer. That is one of the most sort of fascinating fields that I have sort of seen. But at that point in time, if you had asked me that I'll become the chancellor, impossible. The same thing, like, for example, the highest honor in science is Nobel Prize. After that, the highest honor is Fellowship of Royal Society.
Royal Society, yeah.
Yeah. And as luck would have it, in 360 years, there have been only 3 Indians from India who have become FRS, leading scientists. One is my guru, Professor M.M. Sharma. The second was Professor Narasimha.
Radha Narasimha, yeah.
Radha Narasimha, and I say was because he's unfortunately. Yeah. And third is myself. Okay, 3 of us. And the interesting thing about FRS is that you sign in the same book that Newton had signed. And in fact, you do the same process, by the way, like you have an ink pot and you put that, then sign, and they make you practice actually, because if you take too much of ink, you will spoil it. If you take too little, then you will go back again and again. In fact, one Nobel laureate was with me when he got FRS, and he was saying it was easier to do Nobel Prize work than practice it in one stroke. Anyway, but then when I was studying Newton's laws of motion in college, if somebody had told me I will sign in the same book that Newton would cite, I would not have believed it. Correct. So there are many things in my life which have happened. Like, for example, I was born in a very poor family. My father died when I was 6. And my mother brought me to Mumbai, and conditions were very hard. 2 meals a day was a challenge. I walked barefoot until I was 12. I studied under street lights, sometimes on railway platforms, and all sorts of things. And then it was and I stood 11th among 135,000 students in Maharashtra state, and still I was going to leave education and take up a job, because my mother was so poor and she was struggling. And then came Tata Scholarship. And I became a Tata Scholar, 60 rupees per month, and that's how I could study. That's why you are interviewing me today. Now, when I was visiting, and then Ratan Tata and I got Padma Bhushan together. All right? Now, when I was going to Bombay House, if somebody had told me that the President of India will give Padma Bhushan to you and to Ratan Tata at the same time, I would not have believed it. Similarly, American Academy of Arts and Science, was formed in 1760. Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were the creators of that. And then all, Winston Churchill and Einstein, all sorts of great people have become fellows. And Ratan Tata and I were elected to that academy at the same time. And we signed on the same page, one after the other. Second. Third, there were these national leadership awards that were created. And the very first award in industry went to Ratan Tata.
Mm.
In social work, it went to 11 Bhatt. And in science and technology, it went to me. That means Ratan and I got National Leadership Award at the same time.
Mm.
So as somebody who was getting a Tata Scholarship by going to Bombay House every month, all right, would have, and this is House of Tatas, so as to say, I would not have imagined that this will happen, basically. That's why I always tell young people that it does not matter where you are born, to whom you are born, how you are born, etc. Your future is in your hands, basically. What you will become is not known when you sort of do that. So just as you said, when I entered UDCT, did you think that you will become Chancellor? I didn't think that I will sign in the book that Newton had signed while I was studying Newton's laws. Or I did not think that I'll get all these honors along with Ratan Tata at the same time when I was taking Tata Scholarship.
Mm. So what is that one thing you did in your journey in retrospect that set you in momentum to get all of these things, to achieve these?
I think the basic trait that people always talk about me is about the optimism. Yeah, and of course, some call me dangerous optimism. In fact, when my 60 years were celebrated, Narayan Murthy is a very close friend, wonderful human being, great leader. He also came and spoke. And his speech is there, of course, on the web. And there he said, I rarely get depressed. But if I do, Sudha tells me, why don't you phone your friend Ramesh Mashelkar? You understand? Now, where does that come from? I would say partly because I always had scarcity, but that was coupled with aspiration. And scarcity and aspiration is a deadly combination. When your stomach is full, you feel like lying down. You don't feel like running. But if you're hungry, that hunger takes you sort of to places. That's number one. And I've been always hungry. The second point is the way you look at things. I'll give you an instance to sort of say this because this is very important. The way I look at things. Delhi University, there was this Physics Teachers Association, and they had a program. And there was some turmoil in Delhi University at that time, unfortunate. And after that inaugural ceremony, they were going to take a morcha to the Vice Chancellor in protest of something. I forget now what it was. And then the person who introduced me for whatever I was, Padma or some FRS, etc. And then he said, now Dr. Mashelkar will tell us, as you know, he said, we are all in coma. And Dr. Mashelkar will tell us what to do. So I had exactly 10 seconds to think before I went to the mic. And I said, look, I have never addressed 500 people who are in coma so far. But maybe he did not mean we are in coma. He probably meant we are at a comma. Comma.
Okay.
Comma is one where you're written a sentence, but you're not completed it. You take a pause. Then I said, we have an opportunity when you take a pause, look back and write the rest of it as positive. The second line is also positive. The para is positive. The page becomes positive. The chapter becomes positive and everything is positive. So why don't we take a pause and look at it as a comma and not being in coma? And then I finished my talk and left. You know what happened? They had a second thought whether they should go. And then they said, look, what Dr. Mashelkar said, comma, not coma, etc. And they dropped going there. Now, this very positive way of thinking, basically, is extremely important. Like when suddenly there's a power breakdown, we curse the government, but we are in darkness, we sit in the darkness. But one of us has that, sanity, and he goes and brings a candle and then there is a light. How do you develop that attitude? How do you develop an attitude where you are not a part of a problem, but part of a solution, And therefore, solutioning has to be the key in everyone's life. And solutioning automatically leads to innovation, basically, because people find solutions under different conditions. So therefore, I have a basic dictum that everyone is someone. All right. And Professor Anil Gupta puts it even better. He says that minds on the margin are not marginal minds.
Wow.
What a profound statement that he has made. And that is where we created, since we talk about innovation, there's a misunderstanding that innovation is only done in laboratories with this technological business model. No. There is what is called as grassroots innovation. Artisans, farmers, school dropouts, they do it. And that is why we created what is called the National Innovation Foundation in the year 2000. Right? Government gave us 20 crore. Dr. Vijay Kelkar was the finance secretary at that time, and he saw the wisdom. And actually, the driving force has been Professor Anil Gupta. I call him modern Gandhi. Just Gandhiji did Padayatra. He does Shodha Yatra. That means he goes to villages and finds out what are the innovations people have done. Because they have a problem and they don't want to be a part of a problem. They create solutions. And we see that all sort of across India. In fact, India is fantastic in grassroots innovation. I'll give you two examples. Why, if you are positive and you always become a part of a solution, how you can do that? One is the example of a girl called Ramya. Ramya comes from a village in Kerala. And what happened was that her father was having cancer and her mother was perennially ill. She was not keeping good health. And Ramya had to change 3 buses to go to school and come back and wash clothes. But she had to also study. So she could either wash clothes or study. She said, I will wash clothes and study. And she created a pedal-driven sort of a washing machine, so as to say, So her legs were doing the pedaling, all right, when the washing was going on, and she was studying. Actually, we lifted her and converted that machine into a good rural sort of machine because we needed some design inputs, material inputs, and so on. And Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam gave her the award. Similarly, there was this girl, Shalini. She was just 13-year-old when this happened. And she saw that her grandfather was having difficulty with his walker, particularly going up the steps and so on. So she had that idea of the 4 legs to her front legs. She created them as spring-loaded. So what happens? You go up the step with the spring, you can, move and on. So we picked it up and gave her support in terms of creating a better design. And she actually licensed that technology to a manufacturer who produces some 10,000 of these. And the royalties that she gets are more than her poor father's income today. So I think what is the point I'm trying to make is that we get fixated by this idea of innovation as being sort of just stuck in that. No. Anytime you are doing something better, creating a sort of a better word by using these ideas, I think that is innovation, because that is doing things differently to make a difference, not getting sort of stuck. But all that requires a positive solutioning mindset. Positive solutioning mindset. That's the issue.
Very interesting, sir. This is possibly one of those podcasts where I just want to sit and listen to you speak. I am really enjoying this. So I have one more question here. We often speak of, unemployable graduates in this country. We say that there are 30 lakh engineering graduates every year, but less than 8% of them are actually employable. How do you think we can actually go about, like you mentioned, innovation in education, so that much of these people can be more skillful and much of these people can be better employers as well as employment generators?
That's a very important question, because I come to the fundamentals. The fundamentals are, first is right to education. The second is right education. And the third is right way of education. The three are different. Now, right to education itself was a problem for India, as you know. For a long time, children wouldn't study.
Yeah.
That has been made compulsory now, basically. Second is right education. Now, right education implies that education is supposed to be for creating a better human being, fundamentally. Recently, I got my 46th honorary doctorate from a university whose name is the most interesting one that I've come in my life. Normally, you will find National Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Technology, Birla Institute of Technology, or Tata Institute of Social Science, etc., etc. These would be the typical names of universities, or Bombay University, Pune University. You know, this university is called Manav Rachana University. Manav Rachana, creating a better human being. Can you just imagine? That is the basic purpose of education. All right. So that is one. But at the same time, there is a challenge, because an expert has recently said that 2/3 of the children who are in school today, senior classes, they will end up in jobs which don't exist today. Normally, our education is focused on this job, that job. A carpenter, a welder, civil engineer, doctor, and so on and so forth. So, what do you do then? So, there are fundamentals. That means no matter what discipline you belong to, there are some core attributes that you must acquire. The first is dealing with complexity, because it's a VUCA word: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. You saw COVID come, then you had Ukraine, you don't know what else will come, So a student who is taught in terms of linear thinking, he has to deal with non-linearities of the real world. And second is critical thinking. Third is creativity. Fourth is emotional intelligence. Fifth is cognitive flexibility. The sixth is actually ability to co-creation. And co-creation is not man and machine. The debate of man versus machine is useless. It is man and machine who are going to work together. It is not robots. It is cooperative robots. So these are the first fundamental skills that you will have to acquire. We don't test the students for that. We test them from what they have memorized, and they're able to reproduce. Because once you do that, it just doesn't matter who you are. You will find some way of contributing. That is one part. The other last part is the right way of education. And I'll tell you why that problem is becoming serious now. Because what happened till COVID, online learning was peripheral. All right. Small percentage was online learning. During COVID, online learning was the only learning you could do. Physical learning stopped, actually. Physical school stopped. Now we are coming back. But what is happening is that the world has changed so much that we have to see that new learning will not be digital, will not be physical, but will be phygital. How do you balance both? Let me explain, for example, what the new students will be like, because your question is very important. For them to be job ready, as I said, there are three things: right education, as well as right way of education, besides right to education. So let me take that part. A friend of mine, Uday Gujar, who brought his 8-year-old son to me, a grandson. And he said, we have a problem with this boy. So I said, what is the problem? He said, he knows everything. So I said, how can that be a problem? I said, sit down. What is your favorite subject? His name was Ved. Ved, what is your favorite subject? He said, all subjects. Then overconfident, superb confident. So I said, no, let's talk. Because he had brought me during COVID. So I said, let's talk about biology. I said, what is the difference between bacteria and virus? Tuck answer. Then I thought I will raise the bar. I said, I understand there is something called mutation. What is mutation? Thak came the answer. Then I raised the bar. I said, what is spike protein? There he fumbled a bit, but still he was there. Then we came to DNA, and I had on my iPad a photograph of my having a breakfast with Nobel laureate Watson. Watson was the one who found the DNA structure, double helical structure. I said, who is he? He couldn't recognize. Then I said, Watson. Immediately, Watson and Crick got the Nobel Prize, which year? And also another lady who should have got it also. 8-year-old boy. Huh?
8-year-old?
8-year-old. 8-year-old.
Oh.
8-year-old. Yeah. And because of COVID, he has not gone to school for 2 years. So you can just imagine. Then I said, you know so much about Nobel Prizes. Who is the scientist who has got 2 Nobel Prizes? Immediately, Madame Curie, including the year. Then I said, no, Linus Pauling also has got it. No, sir. The first one was for science. Second one was for peace. 8-year-old. So I asked his father and grandfather, you are not scientists. How come he knows so much? He says, we have given him access to Google. That's it. We have trusted him. Then I told his father that he uses his brain as a storage. He has to use it as an intelligent processor. And for that, you require Guru. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is, these are the new generation of students who are going to come up. But at the same time, in the same week, I heard that near Satara, there's a girl, 15-year-old, she committed suicide because she did not give exams, because she could not attend the online classes, because her poor family could not give her a tablet or a smartphone. This is our India. So when I talk about it, I don't talk about India at 75. I talk about Bharat at 75. Ved Gujar belongs to India at 75. And this girl who committed suicide belongs to Bharat at 75. Our research, our innovation has to cater to Bharat at innovation, Bharat at 75. And that's why in my mother's name, I have created this Anjani Mashelkar Inclusive Innovation Award, which actually focuses only on creating products which represent affordable excellence. Because making high technology work for the rich, very easy. Making low technology work for the poor, very easy. Making high technology work for the poor is very difficult. So therefore, if you see all the awardees, they have done that. For example, if you want to find your hemoglobin, a lot of women die in villages in India because of anemia. And that is very low levels, subcritical levels of hemoglobin. And you can't find them because they don't give the blood. They think blood is very precious and they die. So here is Mishkin Igawale who came, I will not take blood. And he created a device which you put across the finger and you can read basically without taking blood. And that is sort of kind of replacing the current best practice of taking the blood. So he created a new best practice. But then I believe in next practice, not best practice. So he created the next practice, which is now he has created a camera where you look into it and that's it. He has technology by which by looking at your eye, you are able to find out what is your hemoglobin. Now, just think about it. In a village where you require infrastructure, because taking the blood, sending it to lab, etc., etc., this Touch HB could do a job, that's fine. But now you have something where you don't have to do anything. Just look into the camera and you know what it is. Can you see the rural transformation that can take place because of this? We had cancer, for example. A lot of women die of breast cancer because they are not diagnosed early now. And it's painful, expensive, and so on. Now, Mir Shah has created something, eye breast, which you just move around the breast, and for $1, you sort of get the diagnosis. Now it is going to 25 countries. You look at the sort of condition of your lung. You want to find out whether it is TB or whether it is COVID or whether it is asthma and so on. Now, the last year's award that we gave was to Shwasa, which actually you just cuff into a smartphone and it is an AI-based system. And it just tells you exactly what sort of it is. And you can just imagine the transformation that can be. Now, this is going very wide in terms of the surveillance on TB. Why I'm saying all these innovations, as you can see, are not intrusive at all. Don't require operators. They use high technology and they're most affordable. 5 rupees, $1, 0 rupees, because smartphone is actually 0 rupees. You don't, the spirometer, for example, which is normally used, is 1.5 lakh. This is, you already have it, so you don't require anything. The test takes 90 minutes. Here it is instant. The test takes 1,500 rupees. Here it is nothing. These are the transformative solutions, basically, will create that inclusive India. So I think that's what my life's focus has been, on creating inclusive innovation.
Very interesting. So as we go into the future, how do you see the relevance of higher education? By higher education, I don't necessarily mean undergraduate levels, but if we go beyond that, do you think with more access to information like we do, like you mentioned, the 8-year-old kid who is able to retrieve a lot of information from Google, or as AI advances and it's able to do things that a lot of humans could otherwise do through a period of years, then do you think, is it going to be relevant that people pursue a master's, people do a PhD? Will these advanced education be more relevant?
Oh, it will continue to be relevant, because don't forget that the rate of generation of knowledge is exponential. What was achieved in 100 years is being achieved in 10 years. And what was achieved in 10 years
will be 1 year.
Achieved in 1 year. In fact, the Banaras Hindu University had invited me to give the 100th convocation address. And the title of that was related to this very question, where I said, Dikshant ka matlab shikshant nahi hota. The fact that you have got degree today does not mean is the end of your education. It's the beginning of education, simply because the knowledge is expanding so rapidly. So therefore, to just keep pace with what is happening, is going to be sort of a huge challenge. That's point number one. Point number two is that things like AI are going to be transformative. There is no question about that, because a lot of human capacity is going to be sort of involved. And that also is moving so fast. I remember in one of my presentations on exponential, I'm Sir Louis Matheson Distinguished Professor at Monash University in Australia. And I go there every April and give only 3 public lectures and otherwise discussions on strategic issues and so on. Now, one of the lectures that I gave was in terms of exponential technology and how that is going to change our lives, and whether it is big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, whatever. Now, there, the important part is the way AI is going to change. And I mentioned that there is a prediction in a World Economic Forum that by 2025, an AI machine will become a member of the board of directors. Okay? They were wrong. They were talking about 2025. I gave this lecture, I think in 2017 or 18. By that time, it had already happened. So things are happening much faster. No, in fact, 2015, I'm sorry. Because that report came out in 2015, by the way. And they said that's what is going to happen. But in 2015, it had already happened. They had missed it. Maybe the report was completed in 2014. So 10 years in advance. So these advances are going to be extremely rapid, and they are going to be based on the new knowledge that we generate. You can see the havoc ChatGPT has created. ChatGPT, I mean, a student, if he has to write an essay, he has to give some keywords to ChatGPT and create an essay. Now, our challenge is whether he has created it or ChatGPT has created it. So now work is already going on creating softwares by which you can detect it. You understand?
Yeah.
This is always sort of going to happen. So I think the nature of knowledge acquisition will change. Like previously, I remember walking down a few kilometers to go to the library to read a journal. Now, the entire library of Pune is in my pocket. You understand? So that will change. How you use that knowledge, I think, is going to be the key, basically. That means your complete access to all knowledge. But as I said, conversion of knowledge into wealth and social good. You understand? That is the key. And therefore, the greater emphasis has to be on not just acquisition of knowledge, because everybody has access to it, but conversion of that knowledge. That is the innovation. And those who do radical game changing will be the winners. Those who do inclusive innovation, like I mentioned just now, will build better social harmony, because increasing inequalities are going to be a sort of challenge. Those who use that knowledge to create a cleaner and safer world because of climate change, because our future is in danger. So it is all about conversion of that existing knowledge and new knowledge into products, processes, transformations, and so on.
Got it. Thank you, sir. This has been a wonderful discussion, very insightful, very thought-provoking, very inspirational. Thanks a lot for joining my podcast.
Not at all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.